What's going on, everybody? My name is Jordan Kirkland, and this is the Laugh at the Pain show. And I'm here with very special guests, pioneer, outlaw, and a man who is taking agriculture to a whole new level, Mr. Patrick King, the Soil King. Patrick, thank you for being on the show today, brother man.
That's me. That was a good introduction, buddy. That was great. A pioneer, an outlaw. Let's go.
Absolutely. Dude, you've been doing this stuff for like well over 20, almost 30 years, and you've been doing it, and it's been a part of your soul, it's been a part of your culture. You've been changing the game, the way people are looking at farming, looking at taking care of gardening, even in the cannabis industry. You've been doing so much in this, and a lot of what people see today is very much something that you've been a part of to actually help track. So I'm looking forward to asking you all the great questions about how you got there, but we're
Awesome.
gonna but we're gonna start with obviously the basics. Brother man, where are you from, brother man? Where were you born? Where were you raised? And how is your upbringing as a
I
kid?
was born in Santa Clara, California. Bay Area boy. I was
Woo!
raised, I was raised in East or East Bay.
Yep.
And Fremont, Hayward, San Leandro, parts of Oakland. And that's where my upbringing came from. That's where I hit the streets running at a young age, definitely.
Okay. So the streets of Santa Clara, and then what was this time period like? Well, this was like the 70s, the 80s. What was that looking like for you?
Yeah,
Your
I was born in '69,
okay,
so I'm
okay.
55 years old now.
You don't even look it, man. You look great. You look
I
great,
feel it, I'll tell you that.
And so, okay, so you started off in Santa Clara. You were hitting the streets running. Now, what you mean by hitting the streets was were you finding the change in agriculture, the change in that? Like, how did that come into your world? Were your parents involved or your family involved with
Oh,
working with?
I think, well, first off, I'm a fifth generation Johnny Appleseed, so this stuff has been in my blood. I didn't even know it. So I'm
Wow.
a direct descendant to um, Johnny Appleseed was John Chapman himself.
Wow.
And then once I figured that out, a lot of reality hit me of why I am who I am and why I drive so hard and where my purpose is. It's just in line with every direction. So as a young kid, I understand now why my hands are in the soil. My first memory is a strawberry patch, out sitting in a strawberry patch, and I have memories of hands in the soil. It's the most consistent thing in my life is my hands in the soil and cultivating something.
That is
Yep.
amazing. That's really, really cool, brother. I love that. I unfortunately do not have a green thumb. Anything that I try to plant dies. So
I
like
don't believe that.
I appreciate
It's pure laziness. I'm going to call you out. That's what I teach people. There's a lot of synergy and there's a lot of serendipity in putting your hands in the soil. Like there really is. It's something comforting. My serenity comes from, walking outside and looking at my squash plants right now in the backyard. I'm getting ready to harvest them, so I'm excited to watch them grow every day. So I think a green thumb is if you can brush your teeth, you can water a plant.
Mm,
The excuse of not being able to can you brush your teeth every day?
always.
Well, then you got a green thumb.
Okay. We're gonna put this way these days. When I come out to see you, we're gonna try to make something together, and I'm
That's
gonna
right, man. I'm
happen.
gonna
But
show you the easy way.
yeah, show me the
You
easy
know,
way. We're gonna start off small. You know what I'm
it's
saying?
it's simple. It really is. It's simple. It's a simple process of having the right soils and the right biologics and everything to start with, and then you just add water. What happens is we buy the wrong soils. We buy dirt instead of soil. Dirt's dead, soil's alive. So the
Okay.
concept of growing soil produces a plant, and once you get that switched in your head, you can grow anything and be successful at it just by adding water and showing a little love. And actually, you're going to receive a lot more gifts from just doing the process than you ever are, growing it.
Wow. That's amazing, man. Thank you for your insight. I actually wanted to ask you, so what was school like for you growing up? So like you said you always had your hands in the soil, you were always connected to Mother Earth. But what was
Yeah.
like growing up like for you? What was the family
I
dynamic,
would
and did agriculture really come into your
hard. It was hard. So first off, I always start by saying, I'm built by my story, and I love my story, and everything that's ever happened to me along the way is could be a disability, but I embraced it, and it became my ability. And so I'm full of abilities. My story is very hard growing up, but it created the person I am today, who I'm known to love, right? So entering into that, my upgrade, I was a single parent. My mother, my dad remarried. Stepmom didn't like me. It's okay. We have a relationship now, so that's all right. And both of my parents have passed away. Mom, mom had her. My mom had mental illness before mental illness was a thing, and she had alcoholic tendencies, and it was very difficult growing up. She was a single parent trying to raise a couple boys, and my older brother he had issues as well too. And I hate to say it, but I think my mom she just didn't have the skills to be a parent. And that was very difficult from a young age to I didn't have any discipline. That was when Science of the Mind Church came around. It was back when it was really coining up, and my mom was heavy into that structure of Science of the Mind, and the teachings of Science of the Mind when they were teaching back then is really crazy. I go back to thinking about if you let your kids raise themselves, they'll understand life as it is. And the problem with parenting is we put too much conditions and responsibilities on children. That was one thing, and that was a failure of the Science of the Mind Church back then. And my mom, all of her money really went to building a church in Fremont, Niles Canyon, California, and so there wasn't any extra on the table. Not a complaint, I lived. I had my hands in the soil. My other consistency in my life that I'm infatuated and in love with is peanut butter.
Hmm.
So peanut butter fills your stomach, a cup of water and a couple spoonfuls of peanut butter, and you can live life. And
Wow.
so today it's my comfort food. I have I try to stick to one big spoonful before I go to bed, but it's usually two or three. And, it's my comfort food at night. And so I have peanut butters in my life every day.
Wow. You and
It's
John
soil.
Washington Carver would have been best friends.
Yeah, it's like, it still is. And I embrace that, right? I love it. So I love it.
So in your journey, especially with your childhood being as, chaotic as it was, having your mom deal with alcoholism, putting all her money into a church that wasn't really going to fulfill, taking care of a family. Where were you in this process of like finding yourself? What were the things that you struggled with growing up? And then how did you eventually come to becoming, starting off as the soil king and how you becoming to cultivate that into
Yeah.
reality?
That is, it was a long process. What I realized, I was arrested for growing cannabis at the age of 11 and
Okay.
for growing weed in a pine tree.
Very
But I
cool.
grew, yeah, that's my legacy, right? Into the cannabis industry, which I'm not, I'm agriculture. And so with me, even back then, is I grew everything from flowers to vegetables to fruits. And I hung around a lot of older people when I was a kid, and they used to get what's called brickweed, and they would break it up, and the seeds would fall out on a Led Zeppelin album cover, and they'd use a zigzag, and they'd roll off, and this little kid would pick up the seeds, and I'd be planting them. And I planted every seed. It didn't matter what it was. I was infatuated with the compounds and terpenes and the pheromones that a plant gives off. And it was just something that I had a relationship with and everything. So these guys were buying this product, and I knew I could grow it, and I started growing it as a kid. And I didn't have, like I said, I didn't have any discipline, and that's where kind of that went out. School was hard, was difficult, because I really didn't have any discipline. When I was 8 or 9 years old, I'd be gone for 2 or 3 days at a time, and I'd come home, and my mom would say there's peanut butter in the cupboard, and frozen corn was the other thing that I still don't eat that every day, but that was what mostly was guaranteed food was going to be that. And I always wanted attention, and I never sought attention. I wanted negative attention, positive attention, and I never received attention. I wanted to be in trouble. I wanted somebody to yell at me. Where the hell have you been? I never received that as a kid. So I think I kept going on to different, and I didn't have any discipline in my life. It was very difficult to be able to go to school. I went to school. I always felt like I was a little different, you know. Tried to play sports. I was a kid. I was a kid with long hair. You know, I was a great kid. Like there's no doubt about it. And that's what I always talk about. The 13-year-old boy within. I was just, I talk to him every day. He's still my biggest cheerleader. Snap forward, right around the age I was 12, turning 13. I went home. The door was locked. I looked in the window. The furniture was gone. I went around the house. I looked in the bedroom I stayed in, and the furniture was gone. And my mom moved away from me. She decided she didn't want to be a parent, and I was left on my own at that age. And I have no ill feelings about that because it built who I am today. I embrace those moments. I had to find myself within. I had to support myself within. I had to resource myself within. There wasn't places really to go. Tried to continue school. I moved up into it's called Lydell or Mill Creek in Fremont, California, and I lived in a fort and I washed my hair in a creek. And I remember going to school and not having an alarm clock and showing up late. And it was just super challenging for me to continue life as normal people would see life. And I decided to support myself. I grew weed and I rolled joints and I sold joints and I went and got a full-time job at a construction place, and I started working, and I worked my way through high school, and I took care of myself. I bought my own food. I got to got my own room. I got my own housing. I did everything for myself at a young age. And by the time I was 18 years old, I started my first company. It was a plumbing company.
Wow.
And by 19 years old, I bought my first house. And so I bypassed that age as a year. And because of those things I missed, it put me in a better position in life, I think, because of it's all how you apply yourself when you're going through a storm. In anything today, it's the same relation. It says that 12-year-old boy that everybody else would say back then, I would fail, I'd mount to nothing, I was no good, I'm a dropout, you're a druggie, all the stuff, the titles that society puts on somebody. Those are the same fights. Those are the 13-year-old boy within me was my biggest cheerleader. He was the one saying, excuse my French on this podcast, but fuck them, we can do this. That was the voice. And that voice, 45 years later, 44 years later, is still the same voice I had this morning. And so, that we still got challenges in our life and we still know we can overcome them. And there's still a future out there that's bright for us. And there's nothing we can't accomplish. And so what I really learned is to not look outside for attaboys or attention. And I realized that I can service myself with, positive affirmations growing up. And I am still that guy today. So that's what built me in my life.
Wow, man. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing. Also, again, like that is to see here that you showed up from all those days where you could just be out doing whatever you wanted to. No one called you, no one was asking about you. The fact that you were willing to talk about the fact that you just wanted attention, whether it was positive or negative attention. You're like, look, can you just give me
I
attention?
wanted a belt. I wanted a spanking. I wanted anything at that time of my life. It
Just
didn't
show me
matter. I
some love.
wanted attention.
Right, and just show me some love. And then to come home one day and your mom is just gone, like just disappeared. Furniture's gone. Everything's gone. Everything that you knew that you grew up with is gone. And to still have someone, that little kid in you say, you know what? We're gonna still make something happen, even though this was incredibly painful, even though this was so
Yeah.
heartbreaking. Because again, like most people, some people have had that experience in other ways, but especially with the generation today, they can't even fathom that idea of
No,
someone
dude.
just gone.
No.
That is insane to me. But the fact that you also had such a positive outlook on it and how you said it built you, right? Yeah, you got
Yeah.
that was a knife to the heart, but you took that and you said, okay, watch this. You really went, you took a step back and you said, watch this, I got you. Watch this. and you came back in and you still built yourself up. For the people who are listening, how did you cultivate that mindset to show yourself love even when on the external side it wasn't shown to you? Like, how did you keep yourself going in that positive state where when everything else was so rough, you were still able to go from, okay, I'm gonna sell weed to get the next step, and I'm gonna go into a construction to get to the next step, and then I'm gonna start my own business to get to the next step. How did you keep that mindset when everything else around you was just like, no, no one wants this, so why try?
I mean, it sounds like it could have been easy, but it really wasn't.
Right.
And I was left with no options. And you know, I feel like living in the hills in a fort was something I could do today. You know, it was like it wasn't hard for me to assess the situation and realize, you know, I had when I was younger. I mean, I still have it. It's something called adrenal hyperplasia. And when I was, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, I was dropped off at UC Med Center in San Francisco for, you know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks at a time as a case study because we didn't have any medical insurance. And adrenal hyperplasia was that your adrenal glands are producing adrenaline and things at a younger age. So I matured at a younger age too. You know, I had hair on my armpits and, you know, 6, 7, 8 years old. And I was growing up differently. So I always felt different. And I always had a struggle with, you know, people not wanting me for these labels that society puts on you and things like that. I had a doctor named Dr. Conte and another doctor, and you know, I'd go into these. I remember going through Halloween, and I'd be in the hospital at UC Med Center when I was a kid, and yeah, it was horrible, man. That whole process of my life, but I think that stimulated me from it was like a separation thing, because I didn't have my parents at a young age for a long amount of time. So it almost conditioned me for my future, who I was going to be, and bring a light on that whole thing is the doctors would tell me if I didn't take the large amounts of pharmaceuticals that they gave me was prednisone and cortisone, I mean, I'm sorry, super high levels that would mess anybody up. That if I didn't stay on a regimen, that I would never see the age of 18 and I would die. It's like there's a lot, man.
Wow.
And when I was about 12 years old, 11 years old, I quit taking the medication. When I hit 18, I remember calling Dr. Conte and said, "Well, I'm still alive. How about that?" And he told me I would never have children. And when I had my first daughter, I called him up and said, "Well, you were wrong about that. You know, I'm almost 30 years old now. I'm having my first child,
Wow.
and I'm still alive, by the way." And so I don't know, just all those things that happened to me as a kid probably numbed me, right? You know, there's a lot of severe other things that happened in the process. You know, I wasn't protected as a child. I just wasn't protected as a child. And, you know, and I grew up later in life. I ended up, I ended up wanting a relationship with both of my parents. My mom, I built her two houses in my adulthood. She passed away now. I kindled that relationship and I carried her out of this world. And I'm honored to be able to fight that fight and bring her back in and forgive her, you know. And same with my father, who's passed away now. I kindled that relationship. They both put energy into the relationship later on in life as you get older. So I harbor no resentments. And I don't, I don't if I had to choose life again in a different way, I think I'm a lot better 55-year-old. Look at me, man. I got the character I want to be. Like, how many 55-year-olds can embrace themselves and, be built by like this, so I don't regret where I came from at all. And I'm really super happy that I'm humble enough to rekindle the relationships that hurt me in the past. And to be able to, I sat by my mom. I moved out of my house and I built my mom a second house, and I moved. She was given she was given up to 3 months to live. I put her on a high CBD, cannabis CBD, 20-to-1 concoction tinctures that I've made. And my mom stayed with me for 23 months. And she didn't have to take a bunch of pharmaceuticals and go, loopy in her head. She did take some, the yin with the yang. So cannabis, medicinal use of cannabis is, I'm a fighter for that. Like I believe in all botanicals and all plant-based products are better than pharmaceuticals. They really are when grown with intention and organically in the right way, right? 100%. And I've seen it and I witnessed this and I've been part of it. And that was a cannabis strain that helped my mom till the day of passing. And I won awards at High Times and stuff for that. It's called Mama's Boy. That was the name of that genetic. That, anyways, long it's just I'm rambling a little bit, but what I have to embrace mostly is that I was able to, I moved a bed into my mom's room for the last 3 months of her life, and we held hands through that process of her passing. And it's magical, for me to sit here, and I always think about, talking about this later on in life and having resentments and her passing and me having resentments of not rekindling the relationship and making it okay, and forgiveness is powerful. It's so powerful. And I have so much gratitude that I have that ability to see beyond, the resentments in life. It's powerful. With my father was the same thing. My father became my biggest hero later on in life. And, he's a builder developer. I'm a builder developer. And he gave me, he threw me into projects that nobody ever could pull off on Santa Cruz, building subdivisions and different things. I went to prison when I was in my late 20s for cannabis and just other crap. And when I came out, I realized that, and I was working, the whole time. I've always worked, and I've always had money, and I've always been self-supported my whole life. But when I got out, I wanted to change. I wanted different careers. I wanted to do things different, and I was in construction my whole life since a child. So I'm well defined as a builder, developer, and skilled. And coming out, he had a piece of property. We rekindled our relationship. He said, "Hey, you want to build a subdivision over here in Santa Cruz?" And I said, "Yep." So went straight into working and was accomplished on that part of the task. And then our relationship, he put a lot of energy into who I am today as a businessman. And I can remember one thing he's always taught me that I remember from a child. They were divorced at the age of 3, but he always said, "Son, there's no such word as can't." And it's so powerful. And it's so demeaning in a vocabulary to people, because you breed it like a seed into your mind when you say, "I can't do that." There's no way I can do that, man. I manifest the greatness because I can. Right? I see a vision my purpose in life is huge, and I'm on that because I can achieve that. It's always been. It's like I can't go to school. No, wash your hair, jump on your bike and ride it, 3 miles and show up to class. Who knows what time it is? I can do that stuff. It's like if I said I couldn't, how do I feed myself? I can't feed myself. There's no peanut butter. I can work, man. I can do it. And so those key words that in life are so powerful, and our mind is conditioned by our thoughts and our vocabulary. And when we change that narrative, it's magical. It really is.
Dang.
I can do anything I put my mind to. I can do anything I want. And my dreams and aspirations are way beyond what the common mind could ever fathom to be right now. And I'm going to achieve greatness. And I have, and I still will because of that thought process. And I don't need anybody to believe that, because the 13-year-old boy is doing backflips saying, "We've already done it. Let's go, homeboy. Let's keep going," Serious.
That's an amazing mindset. I mean, first of all, the fact that you were able to come to a place in your life later on to forgive your parents. And again, like most people wouldn't be able to, like, they have their resentment, they have their pain. Like I even have my own father wounds and my own mom wounds. And, I did the best I could, whether it came to like loving my mom, who I'm so thankful for that was in my life, and who my pops, he lived his life, he's doing his thing. And I was able to, as a young adult, meet him and have a relationship with him and try to figure out and understand him better, right? Because as young men, you need to, if you have the opportunity to meet your father, and you can have a conversation with them, and I would say be pragmatic, learn how to understand him from where they are at, and then understand how you relate but where you differ, and then respect those differences is a key fact in trying to mend yourself as a human being. Then on top of that, I didn't get a chance to ask you, how long did you have to be in jail, prison for? How long was that duration of time?
3 years in San Quentin,
3 years in
28
San Quentin,
months. Yeah,
28 months. And then you
yeah.
come out and you're like, okay, I'm going to do something differently. Like you came out saying, we're going to do something different. And then you kept that mindset. You kept that mindset of saying, look, it can be done. It can be done. And with that mindset, you already said, look, I've already achieved greatness. We're already doing it. 13-year-olds achieve greatness. We're going to make this happen. The only thing that I can even say that could even remotely be equated to that thought process was, for a period of time before I met my mentor, Adrian, is that before that, I was working for about 3 or 4 months where I worked 5 jobs, 7 days a week, and I'd sleep for about 3 to 4 hours a day. And I would go from Sacramento all the way to the Bay Area and San Jose, and it was nonstop, right? I had to time like 40 to 30 minute snaps. I would make sure that if I needed to sleep in my car, I'd sleep in my car. But everything during that whole duration, being sleep deprived, being angry, the moment my car breaks down, I won't have no money. All these things came from in my mindset going, it has to be done because on the other side of this, something really, really good's going to come out of it. And you don't know, right? Like even what you're saying with your story, and I'm hoping people take this from this story, is that you don't know the outcome. You don't. You don't know the outcome. You don't know if tomorrow is guaranteed to you because it's not.
Yeah.
You don't know how it's going to work, but as long as you're subconscious, as long as you keep telling yourself and you believe it, you can't just say it and then do all the actions that don't purgate, believing
Yeah.
in yourself. You have to go, okay, it can be done, it will be done, and as long as I'm doing the things, applying action with positive mindset equates to a great result. And if you can do that, and if you can keep that formula of believing in yourself, being in action, so you can be the person who has the skill set and is ready for the opportunity to come to you, which is what
Yes.
you were always taking care of yourself, you were always self-sustaining, you were always able to, and you were willing. I think that's a key word that I hear in your stories, that you were willing to be able to do the harder work to get the result that you want. And so if you were talking to a young, when you work with a lot of people who are just coming up in business, trying to get their start as well. When you're talking to these young entrepreneurs and these people getting started in their lives, what are some of the things that you tell them, besides I can, and besides, believe in yourself? What are some things that you help them understand as they are going through their own trials and tribulations that they can prep for to be better when it comes to becoming a self-sustaining individual in this life?
It's when I'm up against a roadblock, I don't know how to break through it. Living in fear in your life, and or you're working really hard and you're just not getting anywhere, and you're ready to quit, and you're at that struggling point. No matter if it's in building a business, if it's in a relationship, if it's in addiction, or if it's in mental health, you got to stop. Give yourself a second. And the three simple steps I always use is the first three steps of AA is I can't, he can, and I think I'll let him. And it's a surrender, right? It's I can't do this on my own anymore. I'm going crazy. And I had this as a kid, and this really applies. And I take a breath and I look at myself, and I can't do this. I don't know where I'm going to go. There's nobody there to talk to, or there's no home in Peller to go to. Turn it over. Who can? Well, God. I can't. He can. And the allowing the surrender of my life, and I think I'll let him, is applied to my life and everything in business today, everything. It's just a simple three steps. When you're at that moment and you're grinding and you're hurting inside, feeling the stress or whatever the situation is going in, you can sit down and you can say, okay, enough's enough. I can't get through this. I can't do it. I can't do it alone. You know, I'm surrendering. Okay, you're there. I'm gonna let you. Let's roll. And now, Jesus is my homeboy, man. He rides shotgun with me every day. And so that's that's the roadmap to success with me. I have a 13-year-old boy on one side, and I got Jesus on the other. Who can go wrong, in life? And so, even it's as cliche as it sounds, in business, when you just don't, when you're so full of fear and anxiety, and you don't know how you're going to pay your bills, and it's not coming in, and you're blowing really hard, and you're hating yourself. You got to let that go, man, because the opposite of fear and anxiety is faith. And when you live in the moment, you live in today, and you quit worrying about what's going to be delivered tomorrow, and you just trust in the process, and you work hard, and you move forward, and when you fall forward. It takes off a tremendous amount of stress and gives you the ability to sleep, to eat, just to relax and to move forward throughout the day. And that's it's basic principles of success for me is surrender to the moment.
That's so good, man. That's so good. With that, thank you for saying that. And especially like what you said, on the other side of fear and anxiety is faith. And when
Yeah,
you can have faith, right? I would say I'm a big video gamer, right? So like I grew up
yeah,
on I grew up on
yeah,
movies like that. And they always talked about that there's a video game that I grew up playing called Assassin's Creed. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. I
yeah,
know your
yeah.
kids play it. But one of
I'm
the
not a
big
gamer, but I know Assassin's Creed.
you probably saw it on Netflix. They also did a movie about it.
Yeah,
Great movie, but it is what it is. Regardless, one of the things in the concept of the video game was like, okay, before you are able to, become a true assassin, you have this thing called a leap of faith, right? And so you
yeah,
climb up to the highest peak, and there would be a perch point where birds would be able to sit. And you would go there, and you go and you would watch and you look around, and you would dive. You would just dive, and whatever you land in, which would be like a haystack, or, obviously in reality, if you jump from one of those high buildings, landed in a haystack, you're pretty much dead, regardless of faith, right? It's just physics. But at the same time, it's the challenge of, will you allow the universe, will you allow God, will you allow the Most High to work with you in the fact that there's a story that should be written that you are the character of? And if you're
yeah.
willing to take that leap of faith, the world will work with you, right? There was also a great, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Man of Steel with Henry Cavill. It was the Superman movie that came out in about
I'm
2013.
sure I did. Yeah,
There's a particular point in the movie where Superman is talking to a priest or a pastor in the church, right? And is right before he's about to go off and talk to General Zod. And he is asking, he goes, I'm fearful for the world because I know that they may do damage to it. But because humanity does so many wrongs, I don't know if it's really worth saving. And the pastor, as he's about to walk, as Superman's walking out, he goes, faith comes first. The trust part will have to come later. And if you have faith, if you bring faith first to your life, then everything else will work itself out. It may not look like it right away, but once you have that faith and say, you know what? And my car breaks down, you know what? If I go to jail, you know what? If I can't wash my hair in the creek and I come to school smelling a little smelly and smelling like a little bit more earthy than natural, but you have faith that on the other side of all of this, something great's going to come, you're already winning. You've already kind of won the game because you're allowing the universe to work with you versus you going against it. And so now you said you have a 13-year-old son? Yes?
No, a 13-year-old boy. I have a bunch of kids, but my youngest is 19.
Okay.
His name's Patrick Jr. They call him Swill King Jr. He's
Nice.
6'8", 6'7". I'm 5'7". He's a foot taller.
Ooh.
Looks just like me. He's just a foot taller.
That's
Yeah,
that's so cool. So when it came to raising your kids, especially as an adult who didn't really have a traditional upbringing with a good family, having all those dissonances, and as you were also learning how to rekindle those relationships with your families, what were some of the positives that you were able to bring to your kids, and what were some things that you may have struggled with showing that as they were growing up, you had to try to explain to them, saying, look, I just was raised differently. This is going to be a little bit more work. How did you handle being a parent where you as a kid yourself didn't really have traditional or really loving and authentic parentship?
I think when I was young, in even when I was like 7, 8, 9, 6, I always wanted family. So I was able to see families and want to be part of that. So I kind of like studied it without studying it, you know, what I wanted as a child that I didn't have. So I think that played a part. But I think the biggest part of me was deciding to break the chain. And that chain is my father, when I rekindled the relationship was before my children were born. And his excuse was always, I didn't have a father. And so I didn't know how to be a father. And I used to get so mad and I'd scream at him, you know, bullshit. I'm the best father there ever was. And it's because I chose that path of what I didn't want and what you gave me, right? So you either a lot of times, you know, and maybe it's because I had a different special ability. I don't know, but what I did in fathering is everything my father didn't. You know, and I wasn't the perfect dad. You know, I didn't have, there were skills that I really didn't have. I think the biggest skill was I protected them too much and I didn't allow them to, to have their issues and fail when they were younger. And then later on in life, when my kids got older, my ex-wife and I got divorced, and that was really hard for me. And I believe it was really hard for them and because I always wanted to have that solid family unit, but it just didn't work out that way. Which, you know, God has a way of doing things for you which you can't do for yourself. There's no doubt about it. And I'm in the greatest relationship with the best supportive person in my life I could ever even have today. And so when it goes to parenting, I coached Little League and softball for 13 years. I was a board of directors on the Boys and Girls Club, a long time Lions Club member. You know, I built homes for my community, and I think I overdid. You know, I became a great parent. You know, I'm not a perfect parent by any means, but you know, I became a really great parent. The other good asset that I've had that I bring from my child is, and it's really a detriment and an asset, but I've never had to have a handout.
Mm.
I never relied on anybody else because of the failure that was in my life of not, you know, I've only been able to rely on the 13-year-old boy within and myself to feed me, clothe me, you know, give me the attaboys, you know, keep me going, you know, and so I don't think instilled those things as much as I probably should have or could have in my kids,
Mm.
because I never wanted them to, you know, lean on. I always wanted them to be okay, and I'd always be there for them because that's something I didn't have, and I think that was a mistake of not letting them fail enough because they're adults now and they're struggling. You know, I went through financial difficulties over the last few years, and dad's always bailed everybody out their whole life. Dad wasn't there. If I'm learning, this was a really good thing to witness, watching them land on their feet and having to struggle when there was nothing to give or receive, right? So I go back and I just look at the pros and cons of fatherhood and where I came from and who my father was. And I love my father, and my father made it up to me in business and the life skills later on in life. We built, you know, a farm together. He's a vintner, won awards, great. You know, he's a fourth generation Johnny Appleseed. I'm a fifth generation. So that kind of stuff was in our blood. And, you know, that brought us back together tremendously in my life. I have a lot of gratitude for that. Hope I answered that question.
You answered it beautifully. I think that's amazing. And I think you also touched on something that I was going to ask you, which is how does one forgive a parent for not being the parent they wish they had, right? And so, from my experience, I didn't meet my dad until I was 22 years old, and I had conceptions of him, and from my angle, my pops, he was on TV. He was traveling, he was with celebrities, he was doing this thing, and as a kid, I was like, how is it that this guy who brought me into the world is doing all of these things, but can't take care of his kid. Now, I'm not his only one. I'm actually the third of seven, right? And so because of that, I always kind of had this, I know I can be great, but I just needed to figure out how to make that happen. And what you said, which was learning how to forgive, the day that I met my pops, he was doing a comedy show. And I saw him, I showed up at the spot, and I'm watching him on stage, right? And kind of like how you said, you're a fourth generation, you're fifth generation Appleseed. You came from a fourth generation Appleseed, Johnny Appleseed. My pops is a comedian, and I'm not a comedian myself. I love dabbling in comedy, but I wouldn't consider myself a comedian. I'm just funny when I'm not trying to be. And watching him on stage was like, I do exactly what you do. I say almost exactly the same things you say, the way you say it. The only two differences is that I'm better looking and I and I had an upbringing where people loved me more. And so I was able to have this very surreal moment with my pops of just going, wow, I really not only do I look like you, but you weren't even there in the picture and I act like you more than anybody else, which is insane. Nature versus nurture, and nature plays a really big proponent into that. And I think, you know what, you mentioned what your superpower is. And Patrick, I think I'm going to tell you what your superpower is: your positivity and your willingness to engage the world where fear has no control over you, right? Even with the struggles and the battles you've been through, you have been on the other side of this to engage people and showcase just in your actions alone and how you've taken care of yourself and how you've shown up to your family that, hey, fear is always going to be there. But if I choose faith first, if I move in action with that faith, and I have become the person who can forgive those who have hurt me, I have now ultimately won the game of life. And just like you are creating everything from the plants, your hands are always in the soil. You took that same energy of Mother Earth and brought that into the ethereal, which allowed reality to work with you. And so many
Yeah.
things were able to heal because of that. So thank you for your example of being just the light for yourself, the light for your kids, and for the lights of people you've been able to touch. Now, I know most people who are going to listen to this are going to ask, they're going to be like, Jordan, why didn't you ask this question? So I'm going to ask you this question. Patrick, are you
Yeah.
ready? You ready?
Yeah.
Cannabis. Cannabis. Let's talk about cannabis. Let's talk about the thing that gets everybody happy that everybody's talking about. What are some misconceptions that people have about cannabis that you're hearing today that you would love to just debunk right now?
There's no segregation in agriculture. I'm going to say that again for the back of the room. There's no segregation in agriculture. We are segregating a botanical that saves lives. All plants have an asset and medicinal value to them in one form or another. And so this you know devil lettuce mentality is horrible, and calling it the gateway to harder drugs. No, that's for alcohol. Let's just be real on that. How many how many cannabis events have I been to where there's been only hugs and loves and you know
And lots
great
of food.
times? And how many concerts and stuff have you been into where DUIs and crashes and fistfights break out, deaths, right? So let's debunk right now the gateway. The gateway is definitely alcohol.
Okay.
It's everywhere. So yeah, if we're debunking that. The other flip side of it is, cannabis is in the light now, and when people say cannabis isn't addictive, cannabis is addictive. Everything is addictive. It's an issue one way or another. Children, brain development on cannabis, alcohol, and any other pharmaceuticals that we give our kids every day is harmful to the development stages of the mental mind of a child. No doubt about it. So I don't like to see children like myself at a young age. I think that's a wrong thing to do. And I also think that um, the way cannabis is looked at as THC and a high, right? It's how high can you get, and that is Steve bumped all that right now. There's so much other cannabinoids and compounds and terpenes that are way more than a THC level. Everybody wants to go after the highest THC. It means absolutely the medicinal side of the plant is not the THC. It's a compound effects of everything that plant produces on a medicinal level at once. That's really important, and also the way things are grown. I'm such a hard guy at our world and our agricultural world is so synthetic based, and our food and medicinal, pharmaceuticals are so horrible the way everything is grown now. If you just think of big ag, we'll go into cannabis, bottle nutrients, and big ag and heavy nitrates. It's a left that um, that chemical liquid fertilizer is a byproduct of petroleum industry. It's exactly what it is. It's solvent base. It's horrible for everything. Pharmaceuticals, pills, everything's gone through this, synthetic process through solventless built back up, and that's not the way Mother Nature intended for botanicals to be. As a medicinal product in our lives, she grows them perfectly, and we break that onion down and try to put our own human element on it, that you have to have this and this is the way it goes, and all of a sudden we've taken out all the natural environment of how that plant is going to be grown and healthy, and we have now put it in the hands of human beings that if you don't add this or you add too much of this, it'll burn it, it'll kill it, and that state is, we look at our food supply, we look at the cancer, one out of every two people are going to die in the world from cancer. It wasn't like that, 25, 30 years ago. I don't know what the statistics are, but I think it was one in five in 80s and 90s. Now we're 1 in 1. That's a direct result to the way our food is processed and the chemicals that are used to process it. Right? And processing it and putting it in a box, heavy forms of herbicides, glyphosates, right? I mean, there's just so much toxicity that we don't talk about in cultivation. So I'm really hard on this. I educate a lot on this, and I teach a lot of veterans as well, and I watch veterans. Some of these veterans, they're taking handfuls of government scripted pharmaceuticals every day to cope. Right? The suicide levels are through the roof on veterans, and we don't give them any attention. And now all of a sudden, we have our cannabis industry is here. We can help you with this medicinal plant, but now we're going to teach you how to grow it, or we're going to grow this plant and give it to you, and it's going to be grown with the same solvents that are produced in pharmaceuticals. And if you go into neurological elements in your body, your neurological system is affected negatively by the pharmaceuticals because of the way they're processed. Now all of a sudden we're growing cannabis with the same bottle nutrients and solventless, and we're affecting our neurological system with solvents. And medical, the medical part of a plant is grown with biologics and fungal, right? The world started, biologics and fungal were around way before humans were on this planet. Everything came of biologics and fungal. And that's part of the intention that Mother Nature grown on a medicinal level. And when we eat healthy foods that are grown with the right intentions, it feeds our microbiome system. It's the same when you hear about probiotics and bacteria and good bacteria versus bad bacteria in your gut. It's the same bacteria and fungal that is in our soil. We come of it, right? So when you're growing with intention and you're producing food, cannabis, whatever you're doing across agriculture, you're feeding that circle of life that goes back. And when man gets in the way with these chemicals and nitrates and herbicides and garbage, right, Monsanto products in the world, it disrupts that flow of the circle of life. And now we have killed the cycle.
Yeah.
And so it's super, super important to understand that, when we're talking medicinal or not medicinal in cannabis or food or anything, there's two totally separate buckets for that. There's one that's health and wellness, and there's one that isn't. And with cannabis, we like to sell this one as a solution to medicinal, and it's not. It's a lie. It's just not. It's okay to consume however you want or eat whatever you want. I'm not the perfect person, I eat hamburgers. I like a Diet Dr. Pepper. I was with Amy, sent me a message this morning. What do you want? I want apples and Diet Dr. Pepper. And I laugh because every once in a while she'll buy me Diet Dr. Pepper. I understand health risks, right? It's a choice that I make. But when we're talking about cannabis, the cannabis industry sells these Dr. Pepper style cultivation as medicinal. And I am so against that. And the knowledge of that needs to get out into the world that, it's by choice. There's health and wellness and there's not. CBD is the same thing. All botanicals, you can go through this whole thing with agriculture. I deal with as a vintner, I'm a vintner as well with my farmer, dry farmer, organic vintner in Northern California in Alexander Valley, which is Sonoma County. Some of the best world-renowned wines are grown. And my father's won awards, golds, medals, silvers, San Francisco Chronicle, on the product that we do. And our organic vines produce a lower yield, higher quality, higher sugar content, bricks, and everything in because we do it the way we grow it with intention and responsible organic cultivation style. And then we look at these other farms that are out there, the $2 Chucks of the world or the Camus, all these other Napa or Sonoma County vineyards you see everywhere. And you look down the rows and there's no, these guys are all certified organic because they get away with it because it's a pay to play. And you look around the vines and they have row strips now. You'll see in the middle where you can see weeds and grass like coming up where they mow it. But if you look around the vines, there's no weed, there's no grass, there's no weeds, there's no anything because they still spray glyphosates to kill Roundup. They still spray that. And that stuff is so super deadly. It's cancer causing, and it's killing 1 out of every 2 people. Like it's killing us. And so organic labeling is on those farms that are producing those high quality, $100, $200, $300 bottle of wines. And they got the organic labels on it. And it's all a lie. It's all pay to play, man. It's all pay to play.
So, for people who are trying to find organic, natural foods, cannabis, and just general ways of life, where should they be going to find that? Like, if you were talking to your uncle, your kids, what would you recommend to them? Where they should be going to find the best products that they can find? And again, also keep in mind that, and I'm sure you've experienced this, is that fast food, the junk food, the things that are unhealthy for us, super easy to buy. But all the
Yeah.
things that we state are healthy, that are going to help you, for whatever reason, are super expensive. So how can people, especially if they're on a budget, how would they be able to find how they are able to find healthy ways, healthy foods, healthy stuff to be able to take care of themselves better, even when on a budget?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I have an apple right over there that's half eaten. Anyways, that's 88 cents a pound. Right? Well, I can eat 1 or 2 of those a day on break and it'll fill me up. And I know it's producing. So let's answer the question that you're saying. It's a good convenience in our lifestyles now. We have 2 parents in the house. It's nerve wracking, everybody, what's for dinner? We do it at home all the time. What's for dinner? Who's going to do it? I'll prepare it. I love to prepare it because I like to cook stir fry with things like that. And I like to be in the kitchen, but convenience is very, very important, and that's why there is so much support for fast foods and by choice, that's okay. I'm not knocking anybody that's, going down the fast food route. Just know what I just want people to understand what you're eating. When you're looking at a McDonald's French fry, have you ever seen it in a box, and it's so beautiful. These French fries are long and they're coming out, and French fries they're really tasty from McDonald's. But what that potato had to go through, let me just clarify. Let's clarify what that potato had to go through. It's probably produced in Idaho, right? It's fields of I call it when you ever go through when you're driving through farmlands and you look out and there's all this black soil, you don't see a weed or a plant inside. It's just turned up, right? It's just turned up. Everybody thinks, well, look at how rich that soil is, but what I see is soil genocide. I know that there's so much biology that is in there that a worm can't even live among. So going back to Idaho and the potato capital of the world, those potatoes are they have to be a certain varietal of potato that are big. McDonald's will not accept any bruises or blemishes or holes or anything in any of those potatoes. They have to be grown perfect because they want that little look, the potato look coming out of a thing. So they contract these potato producers, and those potato producers, they plant the potatoes, and when the potatoes are in the ground, they cover everything up. And there's herbicides that are pumped into the ground that you can't even go out in these hundreds of acres of field without a respirator suit on. That's how deadly. It'll kill a human being. Right? It'll kill a human being. Now imagine the water being pumped in there to grow the potatoes, and now the water is running off in the side creeks. It's killing everything, right? It's washing down into the lakes. It's washing down into the oceans. It's washing down. So now we see in the oceans in Northern California and other places, we see a lot of red tide where fisheries are closed for, crabs are closed for the year. They can't do any crabbing because of the red tide. Well, the red algae is produced by heavy nitrates that are pumped on these all these fruit producers or vines or tree farms, and their runoff goes into the creeks and they go into the rivers and they go into the oceans and they create bloom. You're seeing dogs now in rivers that are dying because they have no swim signs. It's because of the algae bloom because of the way our agricultural practices are as at today. Nobody wants to talk about it. But back to the potato. That potato is now harvested. It's brought in these massive pressurized storage facilities, and they're brought in and they're pressurized with a gas. And then I forget how many days or weeks it is, but and then they off gas all that, and nobody can go into that area, into the buildings where those potatoes are for days because it's deadly for humans to be even around this. So now those potatoes come out and they're perfect because there's no worms that are in the fields. When we think of a worm as a microbe, a worm is a form of bacteria that's larger. So in a healthy soil, you can have trillions of forms of bacteria in your handful. And you've got hundreds of acres of potato farmers contracted with McDonald's that have zero biological value to them whatsoever because they have killed everything with gas, herbicides, pesticides. And so now that potato is harvested and brought to McDonald's. And I always say, what is the worst thing, the most deadly? If you go into a grocery store in the produce section, the worst thing, the most contaminated thing on a shelf in the produce section is any roots, carrots, potatoes, things like that, because it's what you're eating is living in the soil. It's the root. So everything's absorbed in it. So it's super important for people to understand, where these things have come through and where agriculture has brought and how sick we really are because we support those things. And when you're going to the difference between going to In-N-Out versus and getting, potatoes versus McDonald's, it's probably not the healthiest one if we did the analytics on In-N-Out, but it's definitely not going to have the value, the death value that a McDonald's French fry is going to have. And you have to give the knowledge to the people so they actually understand. We buy. How many people when you guys are watching this, just raise your hand. Have you ever thought of McDonald's French fries to be a part of the reason why maybe somebody in your life has died from cancer? Supporting that? Ever realized, have you ever had the knowledge of how deadly that potato French fry could actually be? And we're feeding these every day to our children in school and lunch programs. We are backwards, right? The education needs to go out there, and so it's super important to highlight and have real discussions about it. It's super important, and that's just one item. I can go through a whole list. So you did ask me, where do you find it, right? The question you had is, where can somebody purchase for, and where do you go and really get help? We call it nutrient dense food.
Yes.
And nutrient dense food, So I'll give you a concept that I'm putting in development. I do a lot of video. I worked with A&E and producers of show holders, and we're building. I've been working for 5 years now on content. One of the shows that I really want to do, and if somebody out there wants to do it, is a docuseries. It's super easy. Me going into the Sprouts or the Safeway and the organic versus non-organic section, not calling out the store on show, but going into the organic section and pulling potatoes off the shelf in the organic versus the non-organic, pulling out, lettuce and versus the non-organic, and then highlighting the different, known contaminants that are in there. Heavy metals. Heavy metals is a really good one to register. There's, really the biggest heavy metals there's a lot of them we have to worry about, but cadmium, lead, arsenic, and mercury are really I call it the four horsemen that are really, really ones I put my eyes on. And so I really, and other known toxicities. So and then the concept I want to go in and I want to show analytics of really what these foods are and the different certification programs, CDFA that's out there, which OMRI that's out there, that is they're not good certification because they don't allow nutrient dense regenerative farms to ever have access. They really shut them out of the industry, and that's another part of the story. But to show that their test results on what the organic section is versus the non-organic section is, and then go to the farmers markets. Get to know your farmer, right? Find one and ask them, hey, how do you cultivate? What is regenerative agriculture to you? Like, what do you use? What's your style? I mean, do you have, is it nutrient dense food? Do you have, or, talk to them. What's your biological system in your farming? A real farmer is going to be super excited when a customer asks them a thing like that. If they don't have the answer, that's not getting to know the right farmer, right? So you find the craft and the farmer that are producing really great food. And in the show, I wanted to go into the farmer's market and then follow back the guys that are small farmers that produce high quality, nutrient rich foods and don't have the pay to play in order to play with the big certifications to get into the Sprouts. You can't, these small guys that are doing it right will never have access because they don't have the right pay to play, paperwork, and it's a gimmick. It's horrible the way it is. So that's the idea: is get to know your farmer. I have out here in Arizona at Queen Creek, I have Riba Farms. I call him my big brother Mark. Rhino Farms is what he's called now. And Mark grows really nutrient dense food. He grows mushrooms, all kinds of edible mushrooms and everything he grows out there. And so I have a relationship. So every Saturday I go to either his farm and I take up a weekly box, or I go meet him at the farmer's market and I have a relationship with him. And we talk about what's the new things, or what did you see, or this year, what came in and destroyed the crop, what bug, and how are we doing preventative? What's the ideas of using good, healthy, pesticides versus harmful chemical pesticides, and when you find out a lot of things, and you get to know the farmer, you start getting, you can get a box of fruits and vegetables that are in season, squashes and everything else, and you could feed yourself all week on that type of stuff. Well, like is that it's pretty neat, man. I can go on and on about how this whole thing is, and how disrespectful and disruptive our certification programs on the organic labeling is. It's not.
Well, you did. Thank you for speaking on that, and definitely you already answered the question of what breaks your heart, which I usually have done on this show. So thank you for sharing the insight. You know what? We're gonna have you on the show again because I want to be able to break more of that down, and more people need this information. So what we're gonna do is making sure that everybody who's watching this, in the description below on YouTube, you're going to have a bunch of links that are going to be sent that you can be able to reach Patrick on. You'll be able to check out his websites, be able to check out the different programs and courses that he takes or he teaches people on, so you can grow nutrient dense food. And as Patrick said, get to know your farmers, all right? Get to know your people, get
Yeah.
to know who's doing what, so that you can have the best insight from that possible. Last thing, Patrick, what are some of in order to laugh at the pain, what would be the best way that you have taken humor and built it into a motto for your life? And
Say
how,
the question one more time.
so simplified. What is your humorous motto for your everyday life when dealing with pain?
I still didn't hear the first part. What was my model? My
What was
what
your
model?
motto? Your motto, MOTTO.
Oh yeah,
What is
motto.
what is your humorous motto to deal with pain on an everyday basis?
Tens. I can. He can. I think I'll let him. Right. It really is. It's on everything. If I and it always and that always hasn't been, God. It could be anything. It could be the universe. It doesn't have to be directed. I just choose through my life, and I found my homeboy Jesus, man, and he's right there. I don't find him in church. He's there in church. I don't find him in prayer. I find him in a one-on-one connection and laughing and loving and just like, man, really, like it's that simple. But I would say is being humble, right? I like to be humble, man. I know I'm aggressive at times, right? And so I have to check myself. I also raise my hand and, I know I make mistakes and when I see I make a mistakes, I know how to ask for forgiveness because of that. I think that's huge. Is being humble. And I think that's the hugest part is just when Amy and I are not really getting along, or you're having a spousal argument or with somebody and you guys aren't, you're really not just you're in the same house, you're not feeling the vibe. Man, just put yourself in their shoes for a minute. See what their day is like and what they're going through. See how it would make you feel, and maybe you can understand why they're having a hard time today, not understanding and being able to communicate with you. And at that point, you can realize that it's okay to be the first one to say, you know what, honey, I love you. I see what you're going through. I'm sorry that, my attitude made it a little more rough and I'm checking myself and I want to start over.
Man, Patrick, thank you for being an outlaw. Thank you for being a man of
And I'm
integrity.
an outlaw, no doubt about it. Bada boom, bada bing.
There you go. You're always going and
Go.
fighting, and that's what I love about you, man. Well, we're gonna have you on the podcast again. Thank you so much for the time. Thank you so much for the wisdom. Thank you so much for your humor and the information that the people need to hear. And I look forward to people getting a chance to reach out to you from this. And also, you have your own podcast called Built for This. And so I want
Yeah.
to make sure that everybody tunes in to hear you and way more of the wisdom that you share. And so I'll make sure that there's a link to the description to find you below. So, with that being said, thank you so much for your time, Patrick, the Soil King, and we will definitely see you all next time. This has been the Laugh at the Pain Show. I'm your host, Jordan Kirkland, with special guest Patrick, the Soil King. We will see you all next time. Have a blessed day, Patrick. Thank you for being on the show. Of
Thank you.
course, brother. Peace.